Hello, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you're watching on our growing YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for the UNC Duke edition of the Preview Podcast, which we've obviously been doing before every Carolina football game this season. And 4 games in, Carolina sitting at 2-2, 1-2 in the ACC, coming off a 45-22 loss at Georgia Tech. I guess I don't want to look back too much. I think it's important to look back a little bit and kind of talk before we move forward to Duke about what we've seen from this Carolina team 4 games in so far this season. So before we move forward to Duke, before we focus on Carolina and their matchup against the Blue Devils this Saturday, noon kickoff in Kenan Stadium, that game will be on ESPN2. AJ, I want to ask you this because I've been at the home games, you've been on the road as well, you've been at every game this season, been covering the team on a day-to-day basis. What are your thoughts on what you've seen kind of overall from this Carolina team and where they are at 4 games into the season?
Yeah, and it's important to talk about what happened in Atlanta when we talk about the Duke game, because I'm a firm believer that every game is connected in some way. Yep. The season is a book, and each game is a chapter in that book. And the first 4 chapters of the book didn't go by the cover. They say you can always read a book by its cover, right? Yeah. Well, the cover was, hey, we talked a lot about dudes in depth back in August, and we talked about it a lot because they do have a lot of dudes, and they do have a lot of them, which translates to depth, right? But that doesn't mean that the dudes in the depth are going to play well. Yeah. That doesn't mean that just because you've got a lot of guys who have nice rankings in recruiting and you have pretty uniforms and you're the cool place to be and so many things are going well in the program, and there are a lot of things going well in the program, that doesn't mean when you get on the field that you're not going to get whipped by somebody. That doesn't mean that you're not going to fumble the ball. That doesn't mean that you're not going to allow sacks. That doesn't mean you're not going to miss tackles. So football is still football. And I think what we've seen through 4 games so far is this team struggles at some of the basic things in football. They struggle blocking, they struggle tackling, and I think some of the stuff kind of gets in their heads a little bit during games. And I think the staff has a psychological job this week at building the team up mentally, and they also have to fix some physical things and perhaps tweak some schematic things. Mm-hmm. One could say that they're over-schemed. They scheme too much to the point where sometimes you just go out there and on defense, see the ball, find the ball. On offense, maybe you don't need to pull 3 guys or 2 guys at one time. Just block straight ahead. Hit your guy, turn him right, hit your guy at the left shoulder, turn him left, open up all, win your individual battles. Because in the end, there's 22 guys on the field, and there are individual battles going on all over the place. Definitely. Win your individual battles. And if you have really good skilled people who take care of the ball, you're going to have success on offense. And if you've got some rock solid dudes who can tackle and you're physical enough, you're going to make plays on defense and you have a chance to win games. And I think we've seen this team struggle with a lot of the basics through 4 games. They've had some high ends, but to be honest with you, Jacob, they've played 8 halves. And I don't think they've been very good in 5 of them. And even in all 4 games, statistically, they look phenomenal in a lot of ways against Georgia State and Virginia because they scored 59 points. And they averaged 59 points because they got that in both games. They averaged like 645 yards or something like that in those 2 games. They averaged 31.5 first downs. But there were still some glaring issues that we talked about after each game. You go back to Georgia State. They had trouble running the ball conventionally between the tackles. They were not executing at the line of scrimmage. Well, that's been a problem clearly in 3 games so far. It was a problem in Blacksburg, and it was clearly a problem the other night. Against Virginia, they couldn't stop the passing game. They had a mobile quarterback who, by the way, was banged up in that game, but was still mobile enough to get a lot of stuff done. He was able to pick apart the defense. When Georgia Tech switch from Jordan Yates back to their regular starter, Jeff Sims, the guy who was the starter last year, the guy who is the face of the program, the guy who as a sophomore, Jeff Collins wanted him to be the face of the program so much that he brought him to ACC kickoff, and he was one of the 3 player representatives there, something that's usually reserved for seniors or well-seasoned juniors. Jeff Sims is a guy, when he went in the game in his 7 possessions, they scored 39 points and had 328 yards. So the last 2 weeks against the starting quarterbacks the regular starting quarterbacks, Brennan Armstrong and Jeff Sims, the Tar Heels have had a whole heap of trouble defending those guys with their legs, defending those guys with their arms. They've had a lot of problems. So 4 games in, there's nobody in the program that would deny that they have been a pretty big disappointment. They have not played to the level they thought. I think the staff is extremely surprised in many respects where they are. And because of that, they got a whole lot of building to do, fixing to do. And it's not even just tweaking, it's more fixing this time of year than they probably anticipated heading into October. But that's where the Duke game comes into play. How many of these things, how many of these battles at the line of scrimmage, how many missed tackles will we see Saturday? They have to use each week to get better at the basics. And they've got 3 home games coming up, all games that on paper they should win, but we've already seen them lose twice in games that they should have won on paper. So whatever we see Saturday against Duke will be the product of whatever work they get done this week, where the players' collective minds are, and the fact that, Duke has some parts. So how well do Duke's parts play? If they play really well, Carolina might be in for a battle.
Definitely. And I think it's a perfect segue on what I wanted to talk about first. With Duke sitting at 3-1 overall in the season, 0-0 in the ACC is actually the first ACC game of the year. You got wins over NC-A&T, Northwestern, and Kansas, and a loss to Charlotte. So, I think with the loss to Charlotte initially, I think we were all kind of sitting here like, I don't know if this Duke team might be kind of descending to what it used to be before Cutcliffe got there.
That's why I said that, and I got to own it. And I
agree with you.
Look, when I was at Fox and I was at the Star News and I was at Buster, stuff like that, I covered Duke a lot in football. Well, not a lot, but some, because there wasn't as much demand. But I did cover Duke a little bit when Cutcliffe was there. I did get to know Cutcliffe a little bit. And I thought, I was at his introductory press conference. It's one of the best intro press conferences I've ever covered any sport of any kind, be it pro sports or college sports. And he's done an amazing job there. And a couple of weeks ago, when we talked about that, we talked about the league in general. I was like, gosh, that's really a shame. That thing looks like it's headed back to where it was when he took over. Well, egg on my face on that, because they've won 3 games. They have the number 8 offense in the country. Now, I know they haven't played world beaters. Carolina hadn't played world beaters yet either. No. Look, they beat Northwestern 2 weeks ago. They were in the Big Ten championship game last year.
Yeah, it's a good team.
Duke is the only team in the ACC, I believe, with 2 non-conference wins over Power 5 teams. So they won 3 in a row. They've got a quarterback who's chucking around. They got a fantastic running back who would play for Clemson. Would love to have Mateo Durant,
especially this year. Yeah.
I think North Carolina would like to have Mateo Durant now. Yeah. Okay, Bobo is a really nice player. They are converting on 3rd downs. They're scoring touchdowns in the red zone. They look more like David Cutcliffe's team now than they did last year.
Yeah.
So they present challenges. And they're a lot better than I said 3 weeks ago. So I was wrong about that and a couple other things here in the last month. Everybody was wrong about Carolina, by the way.
Yeah,
not just me, not just you.
Yeah, I know we've gotten some flack, and a lot of outlets on Twitter have gotten flack from Carolina fans saying that we overhyped this team. But I just want y'all to keep in mind, this is the number 10 rated team in preseason. We weren't the only.
Yeah, and I don't vote in the poll. I've never wanted to vote in the poll.
Yeah. I didn't think that, and I think we said that the Carolina's, maybe not the number 10 team, and then I think we've been proven right on that.
But it doesn't matter. We never thought this. So whatever we said, we were wrong. But it's okay. I think it's boring if you're right all the time. I love the element of surprise. Yeah. I like the fact that our challenge as journalists this week are, okay, what questions are we going to ask Monday? I had some tough questions. I think there were times when maybe the questions weren't as appreciated as they were after the Virginia game when everything was great. But that's part of the process. And I think it's interesting to watch this staff handle true adversity. The first 2 years, they were still on the honeymoon period in some respects. So now honeymoon's over. Oh, yeah. They played 29 games, or 4 games in the year number 3, and there's adversity. Yeah. And there's some things that are not working. You can't deny the struggles of the offensive line. They want to tell us that the sacks are because of the receivers as well, and the running backs, and Sam, and it's right. But I watched all 8 sacks the other night on TV. I went back and I taped the game, and I went through each frame, and 5 of them were because of the offensive line. They just got beat. Yeah. So you got super experienced guys who are just getting beat. You've got guys on defense that are missing tackles. You've got a defense that appears at times not fully lined up and ready to go when the ball is snapped. These are things that can be fixed. Some of them are bigger fixes than others. So I think that right now you have some adversity going on in the program, and that's what makes it exciting, because I believe that they have the components from a staff perspective and from a talent perspective to fix these things.
Yeah.
Fix them midseason and hum forward. They've got a stretch of games here coming up that they should be able to win. And then they've got some challenges. We've talked about the back half of that schedule for a while. We're not going to see North Carolina on the road until October 30th. And then they go to South. 12 days later, they're at Pitt. And I think Pitt's pretty good, even though they lost to Western Michigan. And then they go to State, which just beat Clemson. So they're going to have an opportunity to pick off a couple of wins or a win and see where you go from there on the road later to see how much they've really improved. So they have a wonderful opportunity over the next month to get better. But you got to win those games too. They've lost twice this year when they should have won on paper. They were the better team on paper, but paper doesn't mean a whole lot in football. That's why you got to put helmets on and pads on and eye black and go out there and try to bang up the other guy more than they bang you up and see if you score more points at the end. And they've only done that twice.
Yeah, no, exactly. And just to dive into Duke a little bit further, you've hit on some of the guys. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on some of their better players and what they've done so far this season before I kick it to you about Duke a little bit more specifically. But you got Gunnar Holmberg at quarterback for the Blue Devils, throwing for 1,140 yards this season, 72.1% completion percentage and 3 touchdowns on the year. Fourth most passing yards in the ACC from Holmberg, and second highest completion percentage in the ACC as well. You talked about Mateo Durant, the running back, second leading rusher in the ACC so far, 522 yards, 6.0 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns. So like you mentioned, really, really dangerous runner, a guy that, as you can tell by that, majority of the touchdowns are going to him, 8 TDs on the year. Holmberg at quarterback's only thrown for 3. One of his hot targets, though, has been Jake Bobo at wide receiver, who we were talking a little bit more off camera, 385 yards on 34 catches, didn't have a touchdown pass so far this season. Flipping over the defensive side real quickly, you got linebacker Shaka Hayward, who actually leads the ACC in tackles so far this season with 42. I thought this was an interesting stat, and I'm not saying this to really criticize Carolina necessarily. I think people can do what they want with this information, but in comparison, Carolina does not have a single player ranked in the top 25 for tackles in the ACC. Gimmel, in comparison, it leads Carolina with 21 tackles on the year. I think number 25 on the list in the ACC was around 24. So no Carolina player in that top 25. Like I said, not necessarily saying that as a criticism.
Oh, they play a lot of guys. They play a lot of guys.
And I think that affects it a little bit.
Florida State basketball, Florida State never has a guy lead the ACC in scoring in basketball because Florida plays 15 guys. So, that's the way it is.
Definitely.
They're playing a lot of guys on defense for Carolina. The Gimmel's out there all the time. And I think I don't want to get too much on what's gone wrong. We want to kind of move this thing forward a little bit. But I do think that Jeremiah spends a lot of time at pre-snap getting guys lined up, something that he talked about after the game Saturday night.
It's pretty
and I would think that that's taken a little bit away from his performance.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because he's way off his pace in tackles. And maybe not having Chaz out there is a factor as well. Mm-hmm. Look, their starter the first 2 games is not their starter now, Asante.
Yeah.
And Asante had an issue the other night with Jeff Sims' long run where he kind of stopped and he didn't get charged with the missed tackle on that one, but it should be a missed tackle because he should have made the play. And Cedric Gray is new. I mean, he had no snaps against Virginia Tech at linebacker. He had 6 snaps last season at linebacker. Now he's the other starter. So I think people need to keep those things into consideration. I do think that Jeremiah is working so hard to get guys lined up and pre-snap that it is taking a little bit away from him. And I think that that's what's so big about this week and moving forward. When you cover the team, and those of you who are watching or listening who are diehard fans, you know, you want to see the organization a little bit better. You want to look at some of the basics, them handle those things a lot better, because I believe that they should be considerably better than Duke. So if they handle the basics well in a game like this and don't have negative flare-ups in other areas, like get a punt block that's returned for a touchdown or something like that, and Sam doesn't keep the ball from going to the ground, they should win the game. Handle the basics. Don't have flare-ups that screw up somewhere else that put you that kind of nullify being better in the basics. They should win this game. That's what I'm going to look for going into this game. That's what I'm going to watch for on a snap-by-snap basis. This football team still has a chance to win a lot of games. North Carolina hasn't won more than 8 games since Mac left the first time. They still have a schedule in which they can win games. Like NC State just beat Clemson, but what is Clemson? NC State couldn't handle Mississippi State on the road. and they lost to Memphis. They barely beat Louisiana Tech, and they lost at home again the other day. Mm-hmm. So Pittsburgh did lose to Western Michigan at home and gave up 44 points or whatever it was. I think those are tough road games, and those teams will all be better by the time Carolina gets there. But Carolina can manage that if they play to their potential. Notre Dame, we'll have to worry about that when that gets there. I don't think most people probably had that pegged as a loss anyway, but it can be a competitive loss where they don't go there and get blown out and confidence is shaken, and suddenly they have a stretch of 12 days. They got to play 3 games, and Mac's trying to med confidence when perhaps the most difficult team to prepare for, Wake Forest, is coming up. That following week. So that's a tough stretch coming up, but they've got a lot of time to fix this stuff between now and then. And the first stage of seeing how much progress they make in fixing these issues will be Saturday against Duke. Duke's well coached. Kuckla's a good coach, really good coach. And Duke will do some things that will challenge Carolina, not just from a physical standpoint. They're going to throw a couple things at Carolina that Carolina doesn't prepare for, because Duke does that to everybody. So how does Carolina handle that? How do some of those guys in defense that have maybe struggled in pre-snap, how do they handle that? That'll be an interesting thing to see, and that'll show what level of growth the team makes during the week this week and then on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing this week for Carolina, which we've talked about a little bit so far, is just I think it's about focusing on themselves. I mean, they're entering the game as 18.5 point favorites. I think that's way higher than it will likely be based on what we've seen from Carolina so far this year. Now, could I see Carolina exploding and having a really good game offensively against this Duke team who's allowing 422.3 yards per game, 26.0 points? Like I said, competition hasn't been great so far, but still sitting at 3-1. No, I definitely think that could happen. But I think this is a week in which Carolina, when you look at what happened against Georgia Tech, when you look at what happened against Virginia Tech, I think in particular that Georgia Tech was a culmination of a lot of Carolina's issues that they maybe have masked up in wins against Georgia State and Virginia, kind of all coming into fruition in one game, and just particularly in that second half, just not really. The Carolina team just really didn't have a clue out there on both sides of the ball at times, and resulted in a 45-22 loss, 23-point loss for the Tar Heels. So getting back to my point, I think this week in particular, and really over the next few weeks, when you look at who they're playing and they're at home, is about Carolina focusing on Carolina and getting better. Because when you look at these teams playing in Chapel Hill, these are games coming up, starting with Duke, that you would expect Carolina, especially before the season, maybe not so much now because of what we've seen, to win. So I think this is a team that, in a lot of ways, like we've kind of talked about, I think just needs to get back to the basics, realize that they've got a lot of talent out there, a lot of guys that are good football players. I don't know if you necessarily simplify it, whatever. I'm not a football coach. But I think when it comes down to it, Carolina, if they go out there and play football against Duke, is a better football team and has better athletes than the Blue Devils do. But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you got to go out there and you got to play and you got to win a game, which is always tough to do in the ACC. So I think it's important for Carolina to focus on Carolina and focus on getting better.
Yeah.
But, that's something we've also heard throughout the season as well. And
we said this a week ago.
Really seen it. Yeah, go ahead.
We talked about this a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
I said they've got 4 games coming up. They should win.
Absolutely.
And we identified things that needed fixing. So It wasn't like everything just suddenly surfaced Saturday night in Atlanta.
Yeah, it was evident. Mm-hmm.
It was okay. They got 4 games they should win. They have opportunities to get a little bit better each week and string together some wins. Okay. Well, they got the what handed to them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. So the fixes are bigger now. Like they're bigger
snowball
projects.
effect almost, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they're the bigger projects than we thought they were a week ago, and certainly anybody in the program. I mean, I'm sure that they're surprised by a lot of this too. Mm-hmm. They're trying to fix it, but you have this mental aspect of things that Mac has probably had to deal with this week, and he's had to coach up not just the team, but he's had to coach up his staff. I'm sure Sunday was a really tough day for a few coaches when they had their meetings, and that's the way it is. And Mac coaches the coaches. And that's why sometimes on Monday, when we ask him a question about something that went right or wrong on either side of the ball, he's like, well, you're going to get Phil in 15 minutes. You can ask him. You're going to get Jay in 20 minutes. You can ask him. I don't think he's passing the buck. He's like, look, that's their unit. I coach the coaches. I coach the team. I coach the coaches, and they've got to get their job done. It's their responsibility. It's Tim Cross's responsibility that his guys get low, are not stood up, and they, have gap control and all that kind of stuff. Stacey Searles' responsibility that when a down lineman between Brian Anderson and Marcus McKeithen shoots right through, and neither one of them see him or make an effort at him, and he ends up causing Sam to move, which runs into a sack. It's his responsibility to fix those things. So that's what Sunday's about. Matt coaches them up to do that. And we've seen all the position groups on this team play well and have really good games. We know what they can do. We've seen individual growth. This is a staff that can absolutely clean up the stuff that needs cleaning up and can get this thing headed in the right direction and get some traction. The beautiful thing for North Carolina about the next month is they've got 3 home games. And I would say that the personnel on the other side of the ball will get better each week because Florida State still has more raw talent than Duke does. I think Duke is a more complicated team to play. But then you end up with Miami here in a couple of weeks, and Miami could be kind of humming along a little bit by then, get some little traction by then, feel good about themselves, and got a little payback thing going on in their minds from last year. That'll be a challenge. And then you get the open date to get ready for Notre Dame. And I think early in the season or before this season, we said, boy, it kind of stinks having an open date before Notre Dame because if they're undefeated, that's just so much hype. That's just overwhelming. Yeah. Just get the game there. Though. Coaches a lot of times just want big games to get there. They don't want open dates before big games. For this team, now that we've gone through 4 games, that open date might be coming at a really, really good time. They get a chance to get some traction going, feel pretty good about things, and then have a week of practice. They practice about 3 times and really shore up some of the basics there. Some intense practice or 1 or 2 intense practices, and then take a couple of days off and then get a little bit rested and make that run. Because that 3 games in 12 days right now is shaping up to be a monster.
Yeah,
and,
no, definitely.
Even if they're sitting pretty after these next 3 games, their season, I think, will be defined in that stretch, unless they just don't make any progress. And I think it may have been defined Saturday night, but I don't think that's going to happen. I do think you're going to see them string together some wins, show some improvement, but they've got to show improvement in the basics. I know I get redundant sometimes in these things, but that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to, how I am when I cover a game. I've got 500 things going on, but I've got one of these. And I've got one of these, and I am going to note certain things and chart certain things during the course of the game. And I can assure you that some of us in the media will have discourse about it. We certainly did in Atlanta, and they were all seeing the same things I was seeing. So it was some interesting conversation. I think that if someone ever was enterprising enough to record it, stuck it out there, it'd probably get a lot of hits on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And it's not trashy stuff. It's football conversation. It was really interesting Saturday night to hear what some of my colleagues had to say, and I shared a lot of their thoughts. So that's what I'm looking for this week. One of the things I love about this job is I cover a new team every year in both sports. And when I used to be in different jobs, I covered a lot of teams. I love to see the growth process. I love to see teams hit with adversity. Okay, how are you going to handle it? Are you going to kick the adversity over here? You're going to push it aside? You're going to plow over? How are you going to handle adversity? And however you do handle that adversity usually determines how the rest of your season goes. And I've seen teams come out of stuff like this and wow, take off like a rocket. And I've seen teams never figure it out. And sometimes I've seen early, really bad performances swallow a team whole and they just never don't have the right spark the rest of the way. I don't think that's happening with this group. I think they're very fortunate that the schedule lays out the way it does right now. There's no excuse not to win the next 2 games, for sure, and look pretty good doing it. But read between the lines. They put 59 on Georgia State, but they didn't run well between the tackles, as we talked about. And that's an issue, and that issue is still there. They've only had 1 good game running the ball with a running back. They need to run the ball well with a running back. So let's see what they do Saturday. By the way, Duke's challenge, 3rd downs and red zone. Duke's 14 touchdowns and 20 red zone trips, and they're 57% on 3rd down. So Carolina's defense is going to be challenged there. You got to be tough, you got to be physical, and you got to wrap them up.
Definitely.
We'll see.
Definitely. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Kind of last thing I want to talk about, AJ, is prediction time, like we do the end of every preview podcast.
I haven't gone there in my mind yet.
I was about to say, I figured you might not have done it.
You always catch me off guard because I'm always the last one to do my pick when we do our staff picks. I'm just not there. I got to go through my week and do all these other things. And I was watching Duke, Kansas that I taped and stuff. So I think Carolina's going to win the game, Jacob. I expect that they should win by a couple of touchdowns. But if anybody's laying down cash based on what I've been saying the last month,
losing some money.
You're in the negative. That's for sure.
I am not responsible for anybody's bets, anything like that out there. Do not listen to me in that respect. I say 34-24 Carolina. That's what I'll put into my prediction, I think. But I'm going to keep stressing this because I've been wrong a few times this season, as many of you guys know. It would not surprise me at all. Really, it really wouldn't. I'm not just saying this. It really wouldn't surprise me if Carolina was to lose to Duke on Saturday based on what we've seen so far this season, not only this season, but really based on what we saw.
If Carolina loses this game, that they got the things that we see that are issues aren't issues. They're then problems.
Yep. They are problems.
But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah. Whatever happens. I'm thinking like 44-24, something like that. Yeah. I think Duke's going to score some. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to believe that they won't. And I think Carolina's going to score because they're at home. And I don't think Duke is going to be able to stop Sam. Sam's going to have a good game. And he and Josh Downs are going to have a lot of connections together because that's Carolina's bread and butter because they don't have a lot else right now.
Yeah, it's about the only thing they got working for him besides Sam's legs at times, excuse me. So, yeah.
Although it would be good to see a Joffrey Brown explosion because I think Joffrey's another guy that has high-end talent. He's got to run the routes consistently. He's got to catch the ball. And, his brother had that problem. And his brother's now in the NFL. So, and Joffrey, the people who know them say Joffrey's more talented. Diami has said many times that Joffrey's faster. So the light goes on for guys. Not everybody's really good the first time they step on the field. Most guys have to just get better over time. Diami did. And Joffrey, I think, will eventually get to that point. And this weekend would be a really good time for Carolina for him to do that.
Definitely. Good stuff, AJ. I think it's a good place to wrap this one up, man. We're trying to keep this a little bit shorter. I think we had 40 minutes on the last one. Nobody wants to hear us talk for 40 minutes. So, or only every once in a while, I should say. They don't want to hear us talk 40 minutes every single time. So,
yeah, I didn't even listen to our last preview all the way.
I listened to a little bit of it, but no, I didn't even sit through that.
I'm too busy. I don't even listen to these. When I did radio, I used to tape every one of my shows and I'd go back and I'd listen to it, but I'd take notes. I had more time then. I just don't have time now to listen to stuff.
Especially mid-season. You got basketball right around the corner. Practice.
I know. By the way, I said Andre Green the other night in our three things, and I meant Antoine Green.
I did notice that
because that morning I was doing something with the class of 22, and Dean and I talked about it. Andre Green's one of the remaining targets, so for some reason that was in my mind. And when you're toggling 6,000 things a day, sometimes that happens. So
I'll give you a break.
I apologize for that verbal typo.
I'll blame it on the drive to Atlanta. That was brutal. We've talked about that before, but
I didn't get home till 10 o'clock Sunday because I had to stop every hour and a half to go to some place and write for an hour and then go drive more and stop and write more. So that's why I'm better off just flying. I can write in an airport. It's just easier.
Yeah, maybe to start flying to Atlanta. That's a brutal drive right there. Don't recommend to anybody, but if you have to do it, you can make it through. It won't be a fun one though. But yeah,
I'm flying for basketball. Basketball for sure.
I'll let that one slide. I'll let the Andre Green slide. A lot of adversity you were facing that night too. Late night, 7:30 kickoffs are brutal from a journalism perspective.
Hey, I fumbled.
Yeah,
it was something going around
the rock.
He fumbled going around that night. I caught the virus.
Yeah, you caught it a little bit. It's no big deal. We'll bounce back on Saturday. We'll have a better performance on Saturday, like the Tar Heels.
Yeah, Sunday when I was driving home, I did hear that. I was like, oh my God, you know how I am. I don't like that kind of stuff.
No, I get it.
I was Mac Brown to myself on that one, the Sunday meeting where you didn't go very well for the staff.
You're criticizing yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't need anybody to criticize me for me. I do it plenty well myself.
Yeah, it passes the past stage. Just got to bounce back on Saturday. You know what I mean? You'll be all right. Yep. Moving forward. All right, but that'll do it for us on this one. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. As always, guys, make sure you like, share, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell as well. And let's do this. Go ahead and like the video if you think Carolina is going to get the win over Duke on Saturday. Go ahead and like it below. And if you're a member of TarHeelIllustrated.com, we obviously post this as a thread in our premium message boards. We'd love to hear you guys' score predictions, your thoughts on the game as well. So get involved.
And if you're not, sign up.
Yeah, sign up. Come on, guys. I mean, it's a great time to do it.
It's like the price of a number 2 in a drive-thru. Sign up, and you're there all month, and you can tell us your pick there because we don't do comments on the videos because it would just consume all of our time.
Exactly. 100%. Basketball's right around the corner as well, starting this week. So it's a great time to get involved with TarHeelIllustrated.com. You can head over, link in the description below if you want to sign up and learn a little bit more about it. But great time to get involved over there. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.